Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada Lord Chaitanya Sankirtan Movement Ki Jai. It's time for Krishna book. And reading from Volume 2, Chapter 19, The Deliverance of Sisupala. Boy, if I had to pick a favorite chapter out of Krishna book, I couldn't do it. But this chapter about the deliverance of Sisupala is really good. King Yudhisthira became very happy after hearing the details of the Jarasandha episode, and he spoke as follows. My dear Krishna, O eternal form of bliss and knowledge, all the exalted directors of the affairs of this material world, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, King Indra, are always anxious to receive and carry out orders from you. And whenever they are fortunate enough to receive such orders, they immediately take them and keep them in their hearts. O Krishna, you are unlimited, although we sometimes think of ourselves as royal kings and rulers of the world, become puffed up over our paltry positions. We're very poor in heart. Actually, we're fit to be punished by you. But the wonder is that instead of punishing us, you so kindly and mercifully accept our orders and carry them out properly. Others are very surprised that your lordship can play the part of an ordinary human. But we can understand you're performing these activities just like a dramatic artist. Your real position is always exalted, exactly like that of the sun, which always remains at the same temperature both during the time of its rising and the time of its setting. Although we feel the difference in temperature between the rising and the setting sun, the temperature of the sun never changes. You are also transcendentally equipoised, and thus you are neither pleased nor disturbed by any condition of material affairs. You are the Supreme Brahman, the Personality of Godhead, and for you there are no relativities. My dear Madhava, you are never defeated by anyone. Material distinctions, this is me, that is you, this is mine, this is yours, are all conspicuous by dint of their absence in you. Such distinctions are visible in the lives of everyone, even the animals, but those who are pure devotees are freed from these false distinctions. Since these distinctions are absent in your devotees, they cannot possibly be present in you. After satisfying Krishna in this way, King Yudhisthira arranged to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. He invited all the qualified Brahmins and sages to take part, and appointed them to different positions as priests in charge of the sacrificial arena. He invited the most expert Brahmins and sages, whose names are as follows: Krishna Dvaipayan Vyas, Bharadvaj, Shamantu, Gautama, Asita, Vashishta, Chavana, Kanva, Maitreya, Kavasa, Trita, Vishvamrita, Vamadev, Sumati, Jamini, Kratu, Paila, Parasar, Garga, Vaisampayan, Atharva, Kasyapa, Domya, Parashuram, Sukracharya, Asuri, Vitihotra, Madhuchan, Virasen, and Akritvrana. Besides all these Brahmins and sages, he invited such respectable old men as Dronacharya and Bhisma, the grandfather of the Kurus, Kripacharya and Dhritarashtra. He also invited all the sons of Dhritarashtra, headed by Duryodhana, and the great devotee Vidura was also invited. Kings from different parts of the world, along with their ministers and secretaries, were also invited to see the great sacrifice performed by King Yudhisthira and the citizens, comprising learned Brahmins, Shivala Kshatriyas, well-to-do Vaishyas, and faithful Sudras. All visited the ceremony. The Brahmin priests and sages in charge of the sacrificial ceremony constructed the sacrificial arena as usual, with a plow of gold. And they initiated King Yudhisthira as the performer of the great sacrifice, in accordance with Vedic rituals. Long years ago, when Varuna performed a similar sacrifice, all the sacrificial utensils were made of gold. Similarly, in the Rajasuya sacrifice of King Yudhisthira, all the utensils required for the sacrifice were golden. In order to participate in the great sacrifice performed by King Yudhisthira, all the exalted demigods like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Indra the King of Heaven, accompanied by their associates, as well as the predominating deities of higher planetary systems like Gandharvaloka, Siddhaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, Nagaloka, Yakshaloka, Rakshashaloka, Pakshaloka, Charanaloka, as well as famous kings and their queens, were all present by the invitation of King Yudhisthira. All the respectable sages, kings, and demigods who assembled there unanimously agreed that King Yudhisthira was quite competent to take the responsibility of performing the Rajasuya sacrifice. No one was in disagreement on this fact. All of them knew thoroughly the position of King Yudhisthira, because he was a great devotee of Lord Krishna. No accomplishment was extraordinary for him. The learned Brahmins and priests saw to it that the sacrifice by Maharaj Yudhisthira was performed in exactly the same way as in bygone ages by the demigod Varuna. According to the Vedic system, whenever there is an arrangement for sacrifice, the members participating in the sacrifice are offered the juice of the soma plant. The juice of the soma plant is a kind of life-giving beverage. On the day of extracting the soma juice, King Yudhisthira very respectfully received a special priest who had been engaged to detect any mistake in the formalities of sacrificial procedures. The idea is that the Vedic mantras must be enunciated perfectly and chanted with the proper accent. If the priests who are engaged in this business commit any mistake, the checker or referee priest immediately corrects the procedure, and thus the ritualistic performances are perfectly executed. Unless it is perfectly executed, a sacrifice cannot yield the desired result. In this age of Kali, there is no such learned Brahmin or priest available. Therefore, all such sacrifices are forbidden. The only sacrifice recommended in the Shastras is the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. Another important procedure is that the most exalted personality in the assembly of such a sacrificial ceremony is first offered worship. After all arrangements were made for Yudhisthira's sacrifice, the next consideration was who should be worshipped first in the ceremony. This particular ceremony is called Agra Puja. Agra means first, and Puja means worship. This Agra Puja is similar to election of the president. In the sacrificial assembly, all the members were very exalted. Some proposed to elect one person as the perfect candidate for accepting Agra Puja, and others proposed someone else. When the matter remained undecided, Sahadev began to speak in favor of Lord Krishna. He said, "Lord Krishna, the best among the members of the Yadu dynasty, the protector of his devotees, is the most exalted personality in this assembly. Therefore, I think he should, without any objection, be offered the honor of being worshipped first." Although demigods such as Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Indra, the king of heavenly planets, and many other exalted personalities are present in this assembly, no one can be equal to or greater than Krishna in terms of time, space, riches, strength, reputation, wisdom, renunciation, or any other consideration. Anything which is considered opulent is present originally in Krishna. As an individual soul is the basic principle of the growth of his material body, similarly Krishna is the supersoul of this cosmic manifestation. All kinds of Vedic ritualistic ceremonies, such as the performance of sacrifices, the offering of oblations in the fire, the chanting of Vedic hymns, the practice of mystic yoga, are all meant for realizing Krishna. Whether one follows the path of fruitive activities or the path of philosophical speculation, the ultimate destination is Krishna. Whether one follows, all bona fide methods of self-realization are meant for understanding Krishna. Ladies and gentlemen, it is superfluous to speak about Krishna, because every one of you exalted personalities know the Supreme Brahman, Lord Krishna, for whom there are no material differences between body and soul, energy and energetic, or between one part of the body and another. Since everyone is a part and parcel of Krishna, there's no qualitative difference between Krishna and all living entities. Everything is an emanation of Krishna's energies, the material and spiritual energies. Krishna's energies are like the heat and light of the fire. There is no difference between the quality of heat and fire. No difference between the quality of heat and light and the fire itself. Also, Krishna can do anything he likes with any part of his body. He can execute a particular action with the help of a particular part of his body, but he can do anything and everything with any part of his body. And because his transcendental body is full of knowledge and bliss and eternity, he doesn't undergo the 6 kinds of material changes: birth, existence, growth, fruit of action, dwindling and vanishing. Unforced by any external energy, he's the supreme cause of the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of everything that be. By the grace of Krishna only, everyone's engaged in the practice of religiousness, the development of economic conditions, satisfaction of the senses, and ultimately the achievement of liberation from material bondage. These 4 principles of progressive life can be executed by the mercy of Krishna only. He should therefore be offered the first worship of this great sacrifice, and no one should disagree. As by watering the root, the watering of the branches, twigs, leaves, and flowers is automatically accomplished, or as by supplying food to the stomach, the nutrition and metabolism of all parts of the body are automatically established, so, by offering the first worship to Krishna, everyone present in this meeting, including the great demigods, will be satisfied. If anyone is charitably disposed, it will be very good for him to give in charity only to Krishna, who is the supersoul of everyone, regardless of his particular body or individual personality. Krishna is present as the supersoul in every living being, and if we can satisfy him, then automatically every living being becomes satisfied. Sahadev was fortunate to know of the glories of Krishna, and after describing them in brief, he stopped talking. After the speech was delivered, all the members present in that great sacrificial assembly applauded, confirming his words, continuously saying, "Everything you've said is completely perfect. Everything you said is completely perfect." King Yudhisthira, after hearing the confirmation of all present, especially of the Brahmins and learned sages, worshipped Lord Krishna according to the regulative principles of Vedic injunctions. First of all, King Yudhisthira, along with his brothers, wives, children, all relatives and ministers, washed the lotus feet of Lord Krishna and sprinkled the water on their heads. After this, Lord Krishna was offered various kinds of silken garments of yellow color, and heaps of jewelry and ornaments were presented before him for his use. King Yudhisthira felt such ecstasy by honoring Krishna, who was his only lovable object, that tears glided down from his eyes, and although he wanted to, he could not see Krishna very well. Lord Krishna was thus worshipped by King Yudhisthira. At that time, all the members present in the assembly stood up with folded hands and began to chant, Jai, Jai, Namo, Namo. When all joined together to offer their respectful obeisances to Krishna, there were showers of flowers from the sky. In that meeting, King Sisupala was also present. He was an avowed enemy of Krishna for many reasons, especially because of Krishna's having stolen Rukmini from the marriage ceremony. Therefore, he could not tolerate such honor to Krishna and glorification of his qualities. Instead of being happy to hear the glories of the Lord, he became very angry. When everyone offered respect to Krishna by standing up, Sisupala remained in his seat. But when he became angry at Krishna being honored, Sisupala stood up suddenly, raising his hand, began to speak very strongly and fearlessly against Lord Krishna. He spoke in such a way that Lord Krishna could hear him very distinctly. Ladies and gentlemen, I can appreciate now the statement of the Vedas that, after all, time is the predominating factor. In spite of all endeavors to the contrary, the time element executes its own plan without opposition. For example, one may try his best to live, but when the time for death comes, no one can check it. I see here that, although there are many stalwart personalities present in this assembly, the influence of time is so strong that they have been misled by the statement of a boy who has foolishly spoken about Krishna. There are many learned sages and elderly persons present, but still they have accepted the statement of a foolish boy. This means that by the influence of time, even the intelligence of such honored persons as are present in this meeting can be misdirected. I fully agree with the respectable persons present here that they are competent enough to select the personality who can be first worshipped, but I cannot agree with the statement of a boy like Sahadev, who has spoken so highly about Krishna and has recommended that Krishna is fit to accept the first worship and the sacrifice. I can see that in this meeting there are many personalities who have undergone great austerities. They are highly learned and have performed many penances. By their knowledge and direction, they can deliver many persons who are suffering from the pangs of material existence. There are great rishis here whose knowledge has no bounds, as well as many self-realized persons and Brahmins also. Therefore, I think that any one of them could have been selected for the first worship, because they're worshipable even by the great demigods, kings, and emperors. I cannot understand how you could have selected this coward boy Krishna and have left aside all these other great personalities. I think Krishna to be no better than a crow. How can he be fit to accept the first worship in this great sacrifice? We cannot even ascertain as yet to which caste this Krishna belongs, or what his actual occupational duty is. Actually, Krishna does not belong to any caste, nor does he have to perform any occupational duty. It's stated in the Vedas that the Supreme Lord has nothing to do as his prescribed duty. Whatever has to be done on his behalf is executed by his different energies. Sisupala continued, Krishna does not belong to a high family, and he's so independent that no one knows his principles of religious life. It appears he's outside the jurisdiction of religious principles. He always acts independently, not caring for the Vedic injunctions and regulative principles. Therefore, he's devoid of all good qualities. Sisupala indirectly praised Krishna by saying he's not within the jurisdiction of the Vedic injunction. And this is true, because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That he has no quality means that Krishna has no material qualities. And because he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he acts independently, not caring for conventions or social or religious principles. Sisupala continued, under these circumstances, how can he be fit to accept the first worship and the sacrifice? Krishna is so foolish he has left Mathura, which is inhabited by highly elevated persons following Vedic culture, and he's taken shelter in the ocean, where there is not even talk of the Vedas. Instead of living openly, he's constructed a fort within the water and is living in an atmosphere where there is no discussion of Vedic knowledge. And whenever he comes out of the fort, he simply harasses the citizens like a dacoit, thief, or rogue. Sisupala went crazy. Because of Krishna's being elected the supreme first worshipped person in that meeting, and he spoke so irresponsibly that it appeared that he had lost all his good fortune. Being overcast with misfortune, Sisupala continued to insult Krishna further. Lord Krishna patiently heard him without protest. Just as a lion does not care when a flock of jackals howl, Lord Krishna remained silent and unprovoked. Krishna did not reply to even a single accusation made by Sisupala, but all the members present in the meeting, except a few who agreed with Sisupala, became very agitated because it is the duty of any respectable person not to tolerate blasphemy against God or his devotee. Some of them, who thought that they could not properly take action against Sisupala, left the assembly in protest, covering their ears with their hands in order not to hear further accusations. Thus they left the meeting condemning the action of Sisupala. It is the Vedic injunction that whenever there is blasphemy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one must immediately leave. If he does not do so, he becomes bereft of his pious activities and is degraded to the lower condition of life. All the kings present, belonging to the Kuru dynasty, Matsya dynasty, Kekaya dynasty, Srinjaya dynasty, became very angry and immediately took up their swords and shields to kill Sisupala. Sisupala was so foolish that he did not become even slightly agitated, although all the kings present were ready to kill him. He did not care to think of the pros and cons of his foolish talking, and when he saw that all the kings were ready to kill him, instead of stopping, he stood to fight with them and took his sword and shield. When Lord Krishna saw that they were going to engage in fighting in the arena of the auspicious Rajasuya Yagna, he personally pacified them. Out of his causeless mercy, he himself decided to kill Sisupala. When Sisupala was abusing the kings who were about to attack him, Lord Krishna took up his disc, which was sharp as the blade of a razor, and immediately separated the head of Sisupala from his body. When Sisupala was thus killed, a great roar and howl went up from the crowd of that assembly. Taking advantage of that disturbance, the few kings who were supporters of Sisupala quickly left the assembly out of fear for their lives. But despite all this, the fortunate Sisupala's spirit soul immediately merged into the body of Lord Krishna in the presence of all members, exactly as a burning meteor falls to the surface of the globe. Sisupala's souls merging into the transcendental body of Krishna reminds us of the story of Jai and Vijay, who fell to the material world from the Vaikuntha planets upon being cursed by the four Kumaras. For their return to the Vaikuntha world, it was arranged that both Jai and Vijay, for 3 consecutive births, would act as deadly enemies of the Lord, and at the end of these lives they would again return to the Vaikuntha world and serve the Lord as his associates. Although Sisupala acted as the enemy of Krishna, he was not for a single moment out of Krishna consciousness. He was always absorbed in thought of Krishna, and thus he got first the salvation of Sayukta Mukti, merging into the existence of the Supreme, and finally became reinstated in his original position of personal service. Bhagavad-gītā corroborates the fact that if one is absorbed in the thought of the Supreme Lord at the time of death, he immediately enters the kingdom of God after quitting his material body. After the salvation of Sisupala, King Yudhisthira rewarded all the members present in the sacrificial assembly. He sufficiently remunerated the priests and the learned sages for their engagement in the execution of the sacrifice. And after performing all his routine work, he took his bath. This bath at the end of the sacrifice is also technical. It's called Avabrita bath. Lord Krishna thus enabled the performance of the Rajasuya sacrifice arranged by King Yudhisthira to be successfully completed, and being requested by his cousins and relatives, he remained in Hastinapur for a few months more. Although King Yudhisthira and his brothers were not willing to have Lord Krishna leave Hastinapur, Krishna arranged to take permission from the king to return to Dwarka, and thus he returned home along with his queens and ministers. The story of the fall of Jai and Vijay from the Vaikuntha planets to the material world is described in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The killing of Sisupala has a direct link with that narration of Jai and Vijay, but the most important instruction that we get from this incident is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, being absolute, can give salvation to everyone, whether one acts as his enemy or as his friend. It is therefore a misconception that the Lord acts with someone in relationship of a friend and with someone else in the relationship of an enemy. His being an enemy or friend is always on the absolute platform. There is no material distinction. After King Yudhisthira took his bath after the sacrifice and stood in the midst of all the learned sages and Brahmins, he seemed exactly like the King of Heaven, and he looked very beautiful. King Yudhisthira sufficiently rewarded all the demigods who participated in the yajna, and being greatly satisfied, all of them left praising the king's activities and glorifying Lord Krishna. When Sukadeva Goswami was narrating these incidents of Krishna's killing Sisupala and describing the successful execution of the Rajasuya Yajna by Maharaj Yudhisthira, he pointed out also that after the successful termination of the yajna, there was only one person who was not happy. That was Duryodhana. Duryodhana by nature was very envious because of his sinful life, and he appeared in the dynasty of the Kurus as a chronic disease personified in order to destroy the whole family. Sukadeva Goswami assured Maharaj Pariksit that the pastimes of Lord Krishna, the killing of Sisupala and Jarasandha, and the releasing of the imprisoned kings are all transcendental vibrations. And anyone who hears these narrations from the authorized persons will be immediately freed from all the reactions of the sinful activities of his life. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 2nd volume, 19th chapter of Krishna, the Deliverance of Sisupala.